We are on day 7 of the Casey Anthony murder investigation. We are in another sidebar. I believe this is the third one in just a few minutes here, a few moments of time. We want to join Meg Strickler. She joins us, a criminal defense attorney, to talk about this. Meg, what's going on here? Why so many breaks in such a short amount of time? Does this have to do with Lee Anthony and his testimony, not recalling exactly what he said?
Yeah, it definitely does. And what I think is a really good idea to have all these sidebars, because it keeps the discussions, the unprofessional things that go between prosecutors and judges and defense attorneys off to the sidebar. They can discuss it without worrying about anybody hearing it and get over the issues. So they're trying to run back up there, solve it now so we can move on.
I can't tell because the testimony has been so short in terms of between the breaks here. Is the prosecution is Lee Anthony not going in the direction that the prosecution wants him to go in?
It's possible. What happens a lot of times when you have family testifying in a murder trial is that you can't, as a prosecutor, you want to get the witness to say exactly what you want the testimony to be, and you prep them, you get them to do whatever they can. But the problem is, this is her brother. So they keep going up to sidebars because they're like, wait a minute, something's not going on the way I like it to be, and they have to worry about a lot of different objections that can come up. And so, yes, they're a little upset, but that is the nature of the beast. That's what goes on.
All right, for our viewers who missed this, we want to play them sound from Lee Anthony on the stand earlier this morning. Let's listen.
What did your sister say about getting Kaylee? When you could get Kaylee?
Tomorrow.
Was it always tomorrow?
It seemed that way.
Did you offer to go get Kaylee that night?
Yes, I did.
What did you say to your sister? What was your suggestion?
I could go get Kaylee. I could have my roommate at the time go get Kaylee. There was, in my mind, no excuse why anybody couldn't go get Kaylee.
And what was your sister's response to having somebody else go get her?
At one point, she was actually receptive to it, but for the most part, it was, I don't want to disturb her, or I don't think Mom would allow it.
Again, that is Lee Anthony. Seems to be in a tough spot. He's talking about June 15th on 2008. He said his mother on that day, Meg, was very combative. His sister was very combative. Her saying, no one's listening to me anyway. The mom is saying, where is Kaylee? Where is Kaylee? So that day is key, Meg.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, again, is you're getting to see dysfunction all over the place here. You got to see the mother yesterday break down in some really, really big tears, but yet you kind of went, at least I did watching it, going, wait a minute, some of these are crocodile tears. And then today you've got Lee Anthony. It's very hard to testify in a trial and to not have any difficulties saying what's going on. And so, of course, he's going to have trouble saying, well, yeah, my sister and my mom were really fighting, and it made no sense as to where Kaylee was. I mean, it just, the whole thing. He has to watch how he testifies. He's doing a fairly good job so far.
Right. Kaylee has died, and his sister is fighting for her life now. Meg, stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We are covering the Casey Anthony murder investigation, and as you see on your screen, live pictures from inside of the courtroom. The lawyers again are in a sidebar. Lee Anthony, Casey's brother, is on the stand today, and it appears there's been a lot of objections into what he's saying, if it's hearsay, if he's recalling what he said back in his deposition 2 years ago. He did say this, though: nothing made sense to me during that time period where the mother was saying, where is Kaylee? Then he tried to play the middleman there, said to his sister, where is Kaylee? I'll go get her. He even volunteered, saying, let's end this. Let me go get my niece. But no one was telling the truth, he said. Want to bring in defense attorney Meg Strickler. Meg, is this odd to you that there's been so many objections here in what Lee is trying to get out?
Yes, it is very odd to me. And the way I took it is that the prosecutors kind of fail in trial techniques 101. Always when you have a client, a person on stand, you have to have it tell story. It's what direct examination is. And so if you really want to get a specific statement out, you best have already done your homework with respect to how you get it in evidence-wise. Evidence in the court of law is so pivotal. You need to know exactly what you're doing. And the judge is sitting there spoon-feeding the prosecutor, saying, do you want this as a past recollection, refresh? He should know this already.
Yeah, Frank George.
So that's worrisome.
Yeah, he seems to be stammering a little bit. Want to bring you right back into the courtroom. The sidebar's over. We'll bring you back, Meg, if there's another one. Thanks.
Yes.
Did you hear the phone call being made, or?
My mom had said that she was going to call the police, and within a couple minutes or so, I ended up getting the name, yes.
What was the name that you?
So that is what happened with Lee Anthony on July 15th, 2008, when his sister finally said, "Your niece, my daughter, is missing. She's been kidnapped by the nanny." It took him a while. He even had to role play being a cop, saying, "Casey, don't do this or mom will call the police." I want to bring in defense attorney Meg Strickler. And Meg, for folks at home watching who don't know the legal process that well, explain what's going on in terms of this sidebar.
What's going on with respect to this sidebar?
Or a sidebar in
asked?
general. It feels like the attorneys in this particular case with this witness are gathering a lot to discuss side issues, in particular, an envelope with items in it. Now, it would appear to me that the items would have been placed into evidence, so there would be no problem with it, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Do we know?
Yeah, again, once again, what was very different in this trial just a minute ago was when they made an objection, just a very basic objection. Normally, you have argument that everybody hears, including the jury. And as soon as they made the objection, the other side, the defense says, "Oh, we need another sidebar." So I think there's a lot of discussions going on that they're being very particular here because of the media. And that's different than other cases. Generally, you make an objection, you wait for the judge to look at you, you explain why you're objecting, and then the other side can rebut the argument, and then the judge rules. Unless it's such an obvious objection,
right,
then no one has to argue.
You brought up a great point, Meg, that it seems the prosecution isn't allowing Lee to tell his story. And yesterday, we heard from Cindy, and she was able to tell her story, very emotional. We heard sound from the 911 calls, so it was more smooth. With this, it seems to be choppy. It seems the attorneys kind of are backpedaling a bit. We're going to take a quick break. Again, they're still inside bar. We'll bring you back to court when they're in session again. Stay close. Casey's brother is on the stand today, week 2, day 2. And what he has said so far, he's talking about that fateful day, July 15th, 2008, where his mother, Cindy Anthony, made that 911 call when the whole family at that point knew Kaylee was missing. When Casey Anthony said she's been missing, she's kidnapped, the nanny took her. He also said that he said to his sister, Lee Anthony, "This doesn't make sense." He even described a role playing, saying, "If you don't tell us where she is, the cops will come here. They will take you to Kaylee. So you might as well tell the truth." We want to go to Meg Strickler, who is standing by in Orlando. Meg, how do you think today's going in terms of the prosecution and what they're doing with this witness?
I don't, like you said just a little bit earlier, I think that what's going on today is there's a lot of fumbling going on, and perhaps what happened early this morning with the rulings on the motions about bringing in the similar transaction might have rattled them or something, because they're not able to tell a story. Lee is not coming off as a loving brother or a loving son. He's kind of coming off as aloof. And also, to go back to the behavior of the prosecutor and defense, if I was the jury right now, I'd be bored and I'd be a little annoyed at the constant interruptions. We just want to know what happened so I can rule and I can go back to my family. And that's not what's transpiring here. We got to keep interrupting every 12 seconds. And that's going to annoy the jury, and you never want to do that. You never want to do that.
Great point, Meg. We'll see if it happens again. We're going to go back inside the courtroom right now.
I'm sorry, I have a moment.
You may.
Thank you.
Lee Anthony on the stand there talking about the odor in the garage, a car that he used to own, and the smell of Casey's car, saying it was really difficult to stay in the garage and smell that. Also, a trip that he took to Tony Lazzaro's house to get Casey's things, her belongings from his house, which included a laptop. We want to bring in Meg Strickler. Is Meg still around? Meg, if you're on that jury, what are you thinking here about you mentioned that he doesn't seem that much like a loving brother. There's not that much emotion here.
No, there's not. And I think it would behoove him to be a little more engaged while he's speaking. But I just think I wanted to know what just happened a minute ago. Sure looked to me like a little bit of theatrics by the prosecution. Lee just said, when you got the belongings, there was nothing from Kaylee with those belongings, were there? And he says no. And then there's a silence.
Exactly.
And he waits and he waits and he waits, and then he says, "Can I have a minute, Your Honor?" He lets that sink in, and That was very impressive, and I give a good bravo to him, because that's important when you have a witness like that who doesn't have much emotion. It's important that you do take the moment you can.
Meg, we got to go. Take it a quick break. We'll be right back.
You do not believe, well, let me rephrase that. It's your belief that those bags were packed by Mr. Lazaro, isn't it?
Sustain.
Your Honor, if I could respond to that very briefly, there were mentioned.
Objection to the speaking objection.
You can approach the sidebar if you need to.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
The attorney's heading into a sidebar, and Lee Anthony is being cross-examined by Dorothy Sims. I want to bring back Meg. And Meg, it seemed like where she was going here was to kind of prove the opening statements in particular ways, saying, did George Anthony have a set of keys to the car? Kind of implying that he could have hidden Kaylee's body in that car, and correct me if I'm wrong. Also, were there times when you're whispering with Casey, he said yes, like there's secrets going on in that family? What'd you think so far?
I think that the cross-examination is going very well right now, because it's important when you do the opening statement, you set out a theme, and they set out a theme in this case for sure. And so then you have to, in every single cross-examination, bring out what you said at the opening. So that's what she's doing here very well. The problem is that you got to be real slow and really careful, because you don't want to be berating towards that witness. And so she's doing really well, I think, so far. But again, now we have another sidebar, because whenever we go through anything prickly, we've got to go to a sidebar to discuss it, which is a little crazy.
Yeah, and what also was a poignant point was that your dad didn't go into the room and say, what is going on here? Where's Kaylee? Which was a key point, again, going back to the opening statements. Meg, we want to take you back to court now.
Have you had an occasion to see and
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, Casey Anthony's brother, Lee Anthony, has been on the stand all morning long, couple hours now. He's talking about that fateful day when his mother called 911 and said Kaylee is missing, that hysterical call that we heard yesterday. And there has been, as you're looking live right now inside of the courtroom, a lot of sidebars today, kind of sparring back and forth. Dorothy Sims today, the defense attorney, not Jose Baez, and cross-examination, and Frank George really kind of stepping over each other and objecting to everything they say. So Lee Anthony has a tough time of exactly telling his story. Meg Strickler, defense attorney, joins us now from Orlando. And Meg, this is a lot different than from what we heard yesterday with Cindy Anthony. It seemed like she had the time and the chance to tell her story. With Lee Anthony, there's a lot of roadblocks.
You gotta wonder what's going on behind the scenes here. And I think, if I could guess, it's the allegations of the sexual abuse again. Clearly, those allegations were made way back when, because there were DNA tests as part of the investigation to see if Lee was the father of Kaylee. So clearly, there's some minefields here that they're both trying to avoid but yet jump into, and that's why I think they're going through all these different sidebars. And also, I think they had Dorothy come up because they wanted a woman defense attorney to come up and change the way things go back and forth. Sometimes that we, as defense lawyers, will use gender as part of one of our trial techniques, and I think they are using that here.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was ready to see Jose Baez on cross-examination. It didn't happen. It was Dorothy Sims. Let's go back inside the courtroom.
You may proceed, Mr. George.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Anthony, when...
Welcome back. We are following the Casey Anthony murder trial, week 2, day 2, and Lee Anthony just excused from the stand. Let's go back to Meg, who is in Orlando. Meg, were you surprised at how short a time Dorothy Sims used in cross-examination?
I'm very surprised. She almost looked a little reticent to go too far. So I'm not sure, but I have a strong suspicion they may recall Lee Anthony later on down the pike and bring up some other issues that come up as more and more testimony evolves in the next couple of days. So I think we're going to hear more from Lee Anthony, and perhaps she was kind of doing that as a tactical trial technique that says, all right, we're going to cross-examine what was testified to today and then cross those other bridges later on.
Right, kind of planting a few seeds. Does your father, George Anthony, have a key to the car? Was there whispering going on in the house on that day? Another witness has been sworn in. Want to take you back to the courtroom.
Good morning, sir. Please tell us your name.
Brendan.